Okay, well, we're live with Howdie and Mark, and this is the first time that they're guesting on the Now Well Zone channel. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And the next hour and a half, there's a lot of material that I'm sure that you guys will bring to the table because both of you are, I highly regard both of you as like powerhouses. That's how I would describe each of you in your own field and experience, just the wealth of experience that you both bring. And I think an hour and a half will be far too little. However, we'll try and make the best of it and see where we go with it. So, hi, Howdy, and hi, Mark. Welcome.
Hello, good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation and to have another discussion on some very challenging subjects.
Yeah. Uh, I wanted to start from today and then see if we want to go into the past of things, as it were. And I would like to ask, let's start with Mark. Mark, where are you these days in your evolution in the research, where you are at now from your days as a DJ, working in the hardcore entertainment business, and then all these years later, where are you now? Where would you say you arrived at inside you in terms of integration with all this knowledge and experience?
Yeah, well, it has been an evolution because I've been through different phases in terms of my religious and spiritual beliefs. And I've been through different phases in my career as well. So, on the career side of things, I did a few sort of dead end jobs before becoming a DJ, a radio and club DJ. And I was fortunate enough to be quite successful in that field. I traveled around the world, played gigs all over the place, had a great time. Did that for 20 odd years. Round about 2007, 2008, I started to have some big questions about what was going on in the world. And this was where I entered the realm of conspiracy research and what might be termed truth alternative research. And I came to realize that, of course, the world is not run by the people we're told it is. It's not governments. There are secret society networks and hidden power houses behind the scenes. And I threw myself into that rabbit hole and specifically music industry research because I wanted to know how that dynamic played out in the music industry, which I'd been a part of. And so that kind of forged a new career for me, which was never the plan. It just evolved that way. And I became an author and a researcher into the hidden side of the music industry. So I've put out a whole load of books, talks, podcasts, video interviews for the past 15 plus years. But on the sort of spiritual side of things, I've been through different phases there. So I went to a Church of England school when I was little, and we were taught about Jesus and God, and we read passages from the Bible. Then, when I hit my teenage years, I kind of left all that behind, didn't really think much of it, just wanted to have fun like any other teenager. When I was 19, just on the cusp of being 20, I started to feel very differently about the world and my place in it. And that led me to be coerced into joining an evangelical Christian church. So I had an aunt who interpreted the way I was feeling about the world as a calling from the Lord. So she said, "Oh, you've got to come and join the church." So I joined the church for 4 years. I didn't like what I saw. I saw a lot of hypocrisy. I saw people not abiding by the things that they were teaching. And it actually caused me to become an atheist. So for the next 15 years or so, I denied the existence of any kind of God or any kind of savior figure. And then round about that 2007 mark, where I got into conspiracy research, I came to realize that, of course, there has to be a creator. There has to be a creative, generative force behind everything. We're here. We're evidence of that. And I then allowed myself to get coerced into these sort of new agey type belief systems where we're taught that our lives are for the benefit of our souls. And we come here to learn lessons. We learn them over successive lifetimes. Karma is a thing. We have to work off past karma, and consequentialism really works. And so that was my belief system for many, many years. And then towards the end of 2023, it changed again. And I kind of shifted into my current way of seeing things, which is, it's very understandable why people don't want to go down this route, because it's not comfortable, it's not reassuring. But I'm someone that's always wanted the truth. And so where I'm at now is, from all the evidence that I see in my own life, my own experiences, and in the experiences of others, there is no evidence that there is a loving, benevolent God of this realm, at least in which we find ourselves, who has our best interests at heart, who wants the best for us. Rather, if we're going to be mature and adult about it and examine the evidence, we arrive at the opposite conclusion, which is whatever God or whatever force or entity or power created this realm wants anything but the best for us. We're not here to learn lessons. We're not here to grow and evolve. We're not here for our own benefit. We're here for some other purpose. How we got here, what force created this, are big questions which remain. But in answer to your question, in a long-winded way, where I'm at in my way of seeing things currently.
Yeah, that's the conclusion that I would say it's an inevitable sort of place to come to in oneself if, as you said, we are to examine the evidence impartially, like in a court of law, Your Honor, this is the evidence. And so this, exactly like that. And not
exactly that. Yeah, if I may just jump in there. When we become truth seekers and conspiracy researchers, whatever label you want to put on it, we're entrained to always provide citations and references. And thinking about my research in my books, I'm pretty wild claims about famous pop stars having been mind controlled. And somebody might say, oh, you've just made that up. You've just pulled that out of your ass. So I have to provide the citation to show where I got that information from. So if somebody's going to make the bold claim that this realm is presided over by a loving, caring, benevolent God, then evidence needs to be provided in that regard. And we don't have that evidence. People will say, oh, what about the majesty of nature and, mountains and valleys and lakes and oceans? It's beautiful. Yes, it is. And there could be another reason for these things being there. But that alone is not evidence of a loving, caring, benevolent God. If we look at the evidence we do have, suffering, pain, fear, war, strife, conflict all over the world throughout known human history, then if we're going to be adult about it, and if we're going to go where the evidence takes us, we have to conclude that whatever entity presides over this realm wants anything but the best for us. Suffering is built into this place as part of the rules of engagement.
Yeah, Howdie. Suffering is built into this place as part of the rules of engagement. That's very well put. What are your thoughts on that?
On suffering?
On Mark saying that suffering it's hard-coded. Suffering is hard-coded into this existence. In this
right, that's how this is designed. Yes, it's structured as well. It's I used to call this a suffering pit of hell for a long time, and when I wrote Empty the Cave, I've changed that slightly to call it a giant pit of distortion, of which suffering is a part of it. So the entire realm is, because the entire realm is built on making awareness believe that something is real when it's not. That's the underlying principle of what's going on here. And suffering just happens to be a good way to lock the awareness into the outward manifestation. The realm is just a distortion designed to get awareness, to put its focus and attention on it one way or another. It doesn't really matter what you focus on or how you focus on it. So as we go along, because I know you have a Castaneda background, so I don't mind speaking in those terms as well, because that's to hear that. So I don't mind speaking in those terms, because I read those books 25 years ago when I was working with my with the Korean monk I was with, and the native medicine man I was spending time with. And I've now come to see that those books, there's a lot of great things in those books, and there's a lot of garbage in those books. And it becomes it's actually a navigation tool you have to make just to go through those books to figure out what's useful and what's not. So I don't mind framing things as well as we go along in those terms for your audience.
Yeah, that's exactly how that's the reason I started the Novel Zone in the first place, because I felt that those books are not the entirety of what Castaneda learned. Those were just some of the curated notes that he thought would make into a nice narrative with some meat and bones built into it.
I would disagree. I actually don't think he wrote many. I think he only wrote about half of those books.
So you reckon someone else did?
Yeah, I think someone else wrote the books. He was the front man for them. And a lot of particularly at the end, a lot of it was just designed to explain what he was doing with his cult organization in Los Angeles that he built.
Yeah.
So there's also a real challenging thing of I also have to look at the books. Sorry to get off topic, but to look at the books in segments, that they sort of run in segments, and each segment is a completely different segment, has a completely different, let's call it, power attached to it. Some of the segments have a lot and some have none. So anyway, just that in itself, dealing with that's suffering in itself, because these books have been presented for a long time as the pinnacle of knowledge. And then when you actually read them and you start realizing there's lots of good stuff in them and there's lots of not, it can become suffering in itself, depending how you handle even those books.
For sure. You're absolutely right. They seem to have been written in modules, and knowing of the publishing business a little bit, as you gentlemen do too, I would think that once he'd kind of exhausted the initial subject matter, his publishers must have come back and said, the suits may have come back and said, well, we need this series to continue because it's very lucrative. What more can we do with this now? And I think that a lot of it clearly changes direction after a while. I think the first 5 to 6 books, for me personally, have a different quality than the other ones. I wanted to ask Howdie, what was the point at which, perhaps in your training with your mentors, what was the point, or was there a point at which you realized, okay, almost everything that I have assumed to be true in my life so far must be relooked at?
Good. That's a fair question. The first 8 years of the work, which started around 1977, 1997. So I started around 1997. When I'd come out of a depression, found the ancient Egypt work and begun studying ancient Egypt and ancient civilizations. And that's when I met Mr. Park, the Korean monk, and soon after met the native medicine men. And I was on an 8-year quest to test reality. That's really what I was doing. I was testing reality for 8 years. It failed miserably every time. Every test it failed. And I thought I was pretty smart. I thought I knew a lot. But then I had a death experience where I fell into a river in a canyon in 2005. And the ultimate error that I had been living under was that I had been treating reality as an illusion, but me as real. And once the canyon experience happened, I realized, all right, I'm just as fake as the rest of reality. That's the point where everything had to change, because that's finally when a realization of emptiness finally occurs. Everything has to turn itself on its head, because everything you had ever believed up to that point is seen to be fictional. So where do you go from that point when you've kind of seen that awareness or the emptiness, that's the underlying truth, and all of this other stuff is like a giant theater production? Where do you go? So that it's been 20 years now of trying to assimilate that experience. and what happened there.
And what do you feel is the emotional? I have known people who have gone through so-called enlightenment or collapsing of the identification process, and they've ended up in mental homes. They've ended up in bad places within themselves, some of them killing themselves over it. And to me, it seemed that the emotional integration of their experience from whatever point on was where they struggled the most. And I suppose whether the I or the identification collapses or not, once we arrive at a point where we realize that that the world we live in isn't for our benefit innately, if someone does arrive there, then what is the emotional integration of that? How does one? It's taken you 20 years, and probably it's an ongoing process. Would you like to talk a bit more about that?
Oh, we should see first if Mark wants to jump in first. Mark, you have something you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty new to all this, actually. You mentioned 1997 there. I've been on this path for about a year and a quarter. It was early 2024 when I started doing my so-called God series of videos. So I'm still discovering stuff and I'm still learning as I go. I'm nowhere near as advanced as Howdie, or I've not had any profound sort of canyon experiences, but I'm just taking the same approach to this information as I do with everything else that I do, looking for the evidence and assimilating it all, aggregating it all, and using the trivium process of truth discernment, I guess, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and just seeing what you come out with. And so I'm arriving at the conclusions that I referred to earlier as a result of doing that. And I think it's very important on this show that we leave some time before the end for a bit of positive reflection on things, because this subject area can be pretty bleak, as you just said. It can be a pretty miserable mind state to be in if you leave it at the point that we don't have a benevolent, loving God presiding over us. I think there's more to the story than that. And so I think it's very important that we wrap up in that kind of way. But yes, I agree with you that when you come across this information, it can send you into a pretty dark place and a pretty lonely place if you're not careful with it. And I discovered that when I put my first God video out, which was January 24, I got heavily attacked, mainly by Christians, I have to say. Didn't get any hate from Muslims or Jews or Hindus or Buddhists. It was Christians, and they were pretty pissed off with what I was saying, although what I was really doing was asking questions. But I noticed as I proceeded with the series and put out a new video every few weeks, the hate kind of dissipated, the attacks fizzled out, and they were replaced by messages of support. And now I'm 16 videos in, and every time I put one out, I get hundreds of comments from people saying, it's great that you're talking about this stuff. It's great to find people that are brave enough and bold enough to ask these questions and put this information out there. And so many people now are telling me that they feel the same way about things as I do, and that other broadcasters speak about, such as yourselves. So it seems there are many people out there that are starting to see the world in this way. So there's more of us than we might imagine. We're kind of becoming a tribe, I guess, in terms of those that are asking these questions. And it can be very reassuring to know that you're not walking this path alone and others are asking these questions. I think it's inevitable that you arrive at this point. When you've been into sort of truth, alternative conspiracy research for long enough, all roads eventually arrive at this point. You've questioned everything else. You've questioned the nature of government, the nature of money, the nature of the music industry, whatever it may be. And eventually, you have to get to the point where you question the nature of this very reality in which we find ourselves. What are we? What created us? To what end? And most importantly of all, what happens to our consciousness when we get out of here, when we leave our bodies? These are questions that any genuine truth seeker has to eventually arrive at. That's real truth seeking.
You see, the thing is that most, and which was evident in 2020 onwards, is I had people literally say I actually don't want to know. From that point on, when things became very obvious, people just, and I observed that it's this emotion, people are afraid of the emotional impact of the knowledge, of this knowledge on themselves. And they're somewhere deep inside afraid that they don't know what to do with it. How do my whole world collapses. What happens now emotionally to me, inside me? How do I deal with this? It's too big.
Right.
And
It's
so,
it's to answer your question. So that's the underlying fear. The underlying fear everyone's got is that everyone feels like an imposter. They look inside for something. They look for an inner child, for a soul, for whatever, and they find nothing. They find emptiness. The problem is everyone else seems very real. So the natural tendency is there's something wrong with me. I don't want to go looking into that emptiness, so I'm going to cover it with whatever to be as real as everyone else. So to go back to your original question, an experience of emptiness can happen literally as you're walking down the street. Literally, someone could just be walking down the street and the realization of emptiness could hit you. And like you say, if someone is not prepared for that, they can very easily wind up in a mental hospital, pushing a shopping cart, talking to themselves for the rest of their lives. Many of those people who are in those situations had an actual experience, but their mind was not able to handle what they experienced. And that's partially why there was always a system of training in ancient traditions. It was to prepare the mind for should such an experience happen, so that you won't crack, that you'll be able to handle it. Richard Rose, one of the teachers who I really have liked in the course of the last 20 years when I found him, he talked about the key element of the work is called getting your house in order. And getting your house in order really means your mind. Your mind has to be clear, stable, and calm, because if you're going to walk across that bridge, which is death, into the realization of the totality of emptiness, and you're holding traumas and pain and suffering and confusion, you're going to crack. So his key was to get that mind fully functioning, and it started with very simple things. Getting your house in order means, like, literally, do you have food to eat on the table? Are you able to pay your rent? Are you able to have conversations with people? Can you, like, literally, you have to get down to the base level of things. It doesn't seem very spiritual, but you're building a foundation to allow yourself to go into those depths. And unfortunately, the New Age spiritual community has kind of said, deny all of that, deny all of your pain and your trauma and your problems and whatever else, and just sit in a meditative state and be happy and forget about all of that, and sort of blast your way to some sort of eternal happiness. Well, the house that's not in order is going on that journey, and you may go through a meditation and cross some state, but if your mind can't handle it, you're going to crack. And so, to simplify your question, there's a lot of work that has to be done. Like, for me, one of the most important pieces of work that I did was my life recapitulation. And I'm almost sure you've done one yourself. I've done 2 of them. It took me 4.5 years. And it was probably, I didn't understand how important it was until I'd completed it. It was like one gigantic hassle. Basically, it's the way I can describe it. I learned something, but it was a hassle. And it wasn't until I finished it, that's when things started to reveal themselves. So something like that is getting your house in order. So these kinds of things are a part of the journey, so that the experience, like we're talking about, should it manifest itself, the physical, because the last thing I'll say, then I'll shut up. The ego is actually, it gives us a gift because it won't let go if it's still traumatized and broken. It's actually a gift. So if that ego isn't, oddly, you have to heal an ego before you can properly find out it's fictional, it doesn't exist. So you have to do all this work to get to the point that it feels safe enough, should emptiness appear, to say, I can let go. Because if it's not, it's going to hold on and say, I'm broken. You have to fix me. So you might as well start healing the broken, I don't want to say broken, but healing the unresolved traumas now, transforming them so that should this event ever occur, your physical form and your mind handle it fine.
Perfect. Very well said. That alone is a whole podcast in itself. Just that topic, because that is where so many seekers who are finding, in a manner of speaking, trip up. They really do. They don't realize what's happened, and they don't realize that a lot of preparation could have gone before, so that now that they are at that place, they would be a lot more.
Like, there's a question. I'll ask Mark that question. Sorry, I'll just jump in. I'll ask him that. So I know Mark too. So it's like, when before you started your work and you got into your conspiracy theory stuff, you were getting out of your kind of your work period and your having fun in the world period, went into this. Was there something that you did as well that you would say now is called, like, I would say, getting your house in order? That's something you managed, you in a sense healed something within first before you attacked the next stage of work. Did you notice something like that?
Not really. Not back then.
No.
It was quite a shocking process for me to discover that the world was not what I thought it was previously. I'd had a bit of preparation for it, in that as a kid, I was able to see through certain psyops and certain aspects of mind control. So growing up in England, I always had a problem with the concept of a royal family. And from a very young age, I used to ask my dad, why do we have this family that are given all these privileges and all this wealth over and above all others? What's so special about them? And I never got any adequate answers. So from an early age, I was questioning various aspects of what we're trained to just accept. So I guess that's stood me in good stead for when I eventually embarked on conspiracy research. But I kind of stumbled into it in the dark with no guidebook or roadmap, didn't really know where I was going with it. And that's why I say that I never planned for this career now, writing books and touring around doing presentations and such. It was never part of my plan. It's just come about that way. But to what you were saying there about being prepared, it's definitely the key to everything, because from the research I've been doing more recently, I'm hearing a lot about how we have to let go of personal attachments to this realm, to material things, and also to people, to loved ones. Because if we hold on to those attachments, to those relationships too tightly, that might just prevent our being able to get out of this place, get out of this realm, not have to come back. I don't really know what lies beyond this. I've never had an out-of-body or near-death experience. I'm just going by information that I've read and things that I've heard other people say. But there does seem to be the possibility that we might somehow find ourselves back in this realm in a new life if we're not prepared for what we encounter when we cross over. And if part of that being prepared involves letting go of not just people but things, then I think that's a worthwhile exercise. So in recent months, I've been getting rid of my record collection, which I never thought I would do. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, what's going to happen to your records, I'd have said they're coming in the grave with me, or the crematorium. But recently, I've been thinking, well, you know what? They're just records. If I want to hear the piece of music again, I can get it online. Yes, they come with memories attached, and I can recall where I was and what I was doing every time I pull a record out of the crate. But I'm not going to let my records keep me grounded in this place if letting go of my attachment to them can be key to my exiting. Because I don't know about you guys, I think I can probably predict the answer, but I myself have no interest in ever coming back to this place in any way, shape, or form ever again. So if selling my records, and also I've been doing what you refer to as the recapitulation exercise, I prefer to call it a review or a recap exercise, because I don't like capitulating to anyone or anything. But I've been writing down in a book everything I can remember about what I've done in my life. I haven't got very far. I'm at about 2 years of age at the moment. It's going to take a while. It's going to be a a work in progress. But I think that's also a very worthwhile thing, because we hear about these life reviews that near-death experiences undergo. And they come back and say, oh, my whole life flashed before me in an instant. Time was compressed and I saw everything I'd ever done from the point of view of the other people it affected. So I've started writing down everything I can remember. As I say, I've got a long way to go with it, but it's going to be very honest. It's going to have to be very candid and very brutal. And I'm going to have to face up to how I think my actions might have made others feel that were on the receiving end of it. So it's going to be difficult, but again, if that's something that we have to do to facilitate our way out of here, it's got to be worth it, right? It's got to be worth a gamble.
Yeah, recapitulation is a very big part of the Toltec system, if for lack of a better word. And it's a very, you can go as deep as you want with it, right? I believe that it is also in some way, shape, or form in the Sufi traditions. There's many traditions that have this have their initiates go through this recapitulation sort of phase of their life. And does it prepare us? I would say yes, but it's an opinion based on experience. It's not an opinion based on knowing what there is, because of one of the best, I really admire that trick personally. I really do. The complete amnesia, so that you just don't know where you were before you were born, and you have no idea where you're going to go after you're gone from here. Once that knowledge is gone from you, your awareness cannot access that. Then you have no way to know whether you've been coming back, how long, what are you, is this the only lifetime, is it not, is it? And the entire ground from awareness is taken away, right? There's nothing that awareness can base itself on except itself. Now awareness has only itself to fall back on. It cannot fall back on any circumstantial knowledge. Any thoughts on that? Any one of you?
Well, I'll just say something briefly and then I'll let Howdie take it. Another question I have is, why do these human lifetimes and our experiences have to be so bloody difficult? Thinking about disciplines and exercises that we find ourselves having to go through. So we were talking about the recapitulation exercise. It's not comfortable to go there, and it's a lot of bloody work. It's going to take a lot of books to fill out with a full human lifetime. But there was a reference earlier to things like meditation practices and all these things that we're supposed to do to prepare our minds and get them into the right state and stuff. And none of them are easy. They take years and years of dedicated training and research and practice. If these lives really were for our benefit, why is everything in them so difficult? Why is everything a struggle? Why aren't the lessons easier to learn? Why aren't the practices easier to master? It seems to me that everything's been made deliberately difficult, or we're told that everything is difficult. It's just, if we had a loving, benevolent God that wanted the best for us, why would life have been made so difficult for us, is my question. So, you guys might want to respond to that.
Howdie?
Well, of course, the world will be difficult to the degree that one's identification is linked to it. And 99.99% of everyone, before they begin doing any kind of real, true work of self-definition, is 100% identified with themselves in reality. And it's and even to find someone who will be willing to question it, I don't think that can happen unless something has happened in one's life, whether it be a really big trauma to themselves or others, or we're starting to get them to say, what kind of realm is this? Like Mark was saying, I wouldn't be walking this path for sure without the murder of my ex-girlfriend 30 years ago now. That just couldn't have happened. or it would have taken something that drastic to push me over the edge of wanting to look at the reality differently. Or somebody will have such an experience, it doesn't have to be trauma, but somebody will have to have an experience of something so out of the ordinary, so bizarre, so insane, so to speak, that they can't package it into the framework of what this reality is supposed to be. And that's kind of where it starts. But the work is hard only to the degree that we are identifying with the character on the stage. Like, it's very, I don't think it's not challenging now. It's very challenging now to know that Howdie Mickoski is a video game character in a video game. He's an actor on a stage, and that awareness is sitting in the seats now, watching the play, knowing it's a play, knowing it's going on, but at the same time, still being invested in the character, still knowing the character has roles to play in the theater. I guess if we put that in Castaneda terms for your audience, that would be truly understanding the last chapter of Journey to Ixtlan, which oddly in that book gets really ignored. There's a lot of really good stuff in that book, but that last chapter, of which the book is based on, tends to get completely ignored because people can't understand it.
Yeah.
It was like the chapter on controlled folly in the second book. It's relating to what Mark was just talking about. It's relating to this starting to break through with the world, and what that starts to really look like when that happens. And that last chapter of Journey to Ixtlan, when what he referred to all the people he met as phantoms, right? Phantom. Everyone's a phantom except, and he was pointing to Don Juan. Everyone but Don Juan's a phantom. But of course, Don Juan is a phantom as well. It's just he's a phantom who knows he's a phantom.
Mm.
That was the point that he was making. It's not that somehow now, he and Don Gennaro are real now because of they're phantoms too. They just know their character on the stage, and they're still allowing the character to play out. So it becomes a very strange line, and I don't want to go too deep with this because it's not where the majority of the audience is. If we step it back, it's okay. You have to, house and order is number one, but number two is the work of self-definition. Self-definition, which is actually finding out who you are. And you have to start with the thing you see in the mirror. That's part of what the life recapitulation does. It's getting to understand who actually is this thing that I've known as me for the last however many years you've been existing in this reality. Who is this thing? How does it operate? How does it think? What does it do? What does it like? What does it dislike? How does it manipulate people? How does it attempt to control things? Like, you have to get to know it intimately before you can ever start to say, maybe I'm not this thing at all. And because I'll use this understanding of the word. There's a word called spiraling inward, or, getting to know the self. The problem is that when someone looks inward, they think that means going inside my body, that somehow my skin is a dividing line between things that are not me and the things that are inside that I need to look at: thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories. And that is the starting point of self-definition. But true self-definition is realizing thoughts, emotions, feelings, experiences, those are also outside of the true self. They're outside of the actual self. And so real self-definition means going in beyond, going deeper. It's going backwards. It's going back into that which you are, and realizing eventually that all of this stuff that you had to define is also not true. And that's one of the reasons it was always valuable to have a teacher around, because when that starts to happen, it gets very confusing. I'll share a story, and then I'll talk with Mark. In the midst of when I was breaking through all of this was so around 2003, when I was really beginning my first break into going into the self. And I had an experience where I was in my mother's town, and I've told this before, I was in my mother's town, and I always walked the same street. Like I would just walk down the same from the grocery store down the street, turn, and there were other parts of her small town, but I'd never seen them. And one day I got the thought, I wonder if the rest of this town actually exists. I mean, I don't know. I've only seen this street. I don't know if any other streets actually exist. So I just decided at random, I'm just going to turn left. And I just went 2 streets over and I went to that street and it was dead silent. Nothing was going on. And then I just stood there and I waited. It took 10 seconds. People came out of every door. Dogs started running around. It was like a scene had just been made to try to justify that this street actually exists, right? For me. But it kind of broke my mind. I was literally in a semi-broken state from this because it was like, holy crap, it's all fake. The whole world is fake. And I sent this message to my Korean monk, and he didn't respond. He didn't speak a lot of English. One of the students responded and just said, Mr. Park thinks you're going crazy, and he thinks it's quite funny. He thinks you should just go golfing for a couple of days and just kind of wait a bit and then think about it after you've gone golfing. So first, okay, I'm going crazy. He acknowledges that, but he thinks it's funny, so it's not a problem. So he said, he's basically saying ground, which in my case at that time was go golfing. So ground yourself for a few days, which I did. And then the kind of crazy part of it left me. And then I was able to just be in a much more functioning, aware, logical awareness of what I had just experienced and been able to begin placing it into some kind of useful container. So that's, I think, a story that can also remind you that something like that, a period of grounding after that is always useful, so you don't spin into what we had just been talking about earlier. And he did it in his way with me, but that was,
yeah, I have a similar story, which is not that old, really. It's fairly recent, couple of years, well, last year even, or year before that. I live in the town of Glastonbury, which Mark may at least know that it's a very
yeah,
it's a very energetically charged
special place.
Yes, it's a very special place, I must say. And I'm telling you that time here flows slightly differently. I lived in London all my life, so from London to Glastonbury, I know the difference in flow of time. Distances are slightly askew here. Something that visually seems quite far off, you'll suddenly find there, you're just there, but that I should have been walking a bit longer to get to that point of view, happens a lot here. Anyway, I was walking up the high street one day, going shopping. The high street, there's only one, it's a one street town. And I woke up there. There's no one on the high street. It's very few people about. I go into the main shop to buy some groceries. 5 minutes later, not even that. I come out, I start walking back down the high street, and it is full of people. Full. I mean, your story is uncanny because it immediately reminded me of that experience. And I literally stood there. There's a big church on the high street. I stood in front of it, and I just let it soak in. I just sort of let the scene soak in. And I ruled out there's no big retreat going on here, where all these people suddenly turned up for breakfast or from, because they're all randoms. They're not one group. They're all just suddenly just buying bread and walking, so many of them. And that was a very, very visceral experience for me about how procedurally generated, that's a video game term for, like, if the game needs it, the game will fill in the details of whatever is needed for awareness to experience whatever it is it's experiencing. And it was really quite remarkable. I'll always remember that there is this element of something is always, you can choose. I mean, for me, I find, which will bring us to the next topic I'd like to discuss, which is simulation or not. But I find that whatever this is, If one is in a, for me, it's an ally. I experience it as an ally, as a, I wouldn't say friendly, because I don't think it has the capability to be friendly or unfriendly. Unfriendly, definitely. Friendly, I don't think. But definitely it can become quite useful and helpful for awareness to grow. That much I can absolutely say from my own experience. And I wanted to go with Mark on this one. Mark, what do you think? Simulation or something else? What do you
I'll
think?
just throw in a quick
Music amongst
anecdote
many?
to
Sorry.
reinforce the stories that you guys just shared. Something that I remember from my early childhood is walking around the roads close to the house that I grew up in, which is where I'm sat right now, actually in the bedroom that I grew up in doing this podcast. But the streets and the houses and the town always looked a certain way to me and felt a certain way. But there were a few occasions where I was walking very familiar paths and everything just felt a little different. Everything was in the same place as it ordinarily was, but it just felt slightly different, slightly askew. And reflecting on it, it felt like I was perceiving it from somebody else's point of view. It's like I'd slipped into somebody else's consciousness and I was viewing these same roads, but they looked different because I was coming at it from a different perspective. So that might lead us into where the conversation is going now, which is what is the true nature of this place? How is it constructed? What is it comprised of? And I've been using computer related terms to convey how I feel about things. And I think something that we've got on our side in these times is that people are familiar with concepts like video games and software and the way they're written in code and the way they're programmed. People are familiar with the concept of artificial intelligence. People are familiar with the concept of Wi-Fi networks, where you have electromagnetic frequencies and vibrations which operate on an unseen level, and they only become real when they get conveyed on a computer screen or a phone screen or whatever. That's when the graphics come in and the text comes in, and then you realize the way everything is coded. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor for this reality in which we find ourselves. So we have all this stuff on an unseen level. And I used to think it was all about frequency, energy, and vibration. There was a quote from Nikola Tesla, which is often quoted by truthers. If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I still think it is that, but I think we can add the additional element of it being akin to computer coding. So I think we have code running in this reality, and we are vessels through our consciousness for decoding it into our perceived reality. So Howdie was talking there about his experience walking down the certain part of town, and you mentioned being in Glastonbury High Street and no one was there, and then all these people appeared. And I think that's the coding kind of playing out. We get the well-worn phrase, if a tree falls in the woods, but there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? In other words, does reality exist in the form we think it does if we're not present to experience it through our consciousness? And I don't think it does, because I think this reality is coded. I also think it's coded to facilitate certain outcomes, which is why there's always pain, suffering, fear, trauma, death. People think that if we all come together and unite, and I used to think this as well, spent many, many years advocating for it, then we can, in our mass numbers, overcome the evil control system that we have and restore goodness and virtue and, wonderful things in this world. Now, I don't think we can, because I think this place is coded to facilitate the opposite of what we're striving towards. So that's why there's always been war, there's always been conflict, there's always been fear, pain, suffering, trauma, because it's the way this reality is coded, it's the way the program has been written. All we're seeing is the inevitable play out of the way the architect of this realm, whoever and whatever it may have been, wanted things. So again, I appreciate that's a pretty bleak viewpoint for someone to have, which is why I do think it's important to put a positive slant on this as we wrap up. But it's another of these brutal truths, these brutal realities that I think we have to face up to if we stand any chance of getting to the bottom of what we're doing here and what this place is. And it goes back again to how we're just left without a guidebook, without a manual. We find ourselves in these lives, in these bodies, and we don't actually have any recollection of how we got here. Another early childhood memory that I have is I was probably about 4 years of age, and I can remember looking in the mirror at my young self, and I hated what I saw because I didn't like myself. And I just remember thinking, I shouldn't be here. This is wrong. This is a mistake. And I've pretty much felt that all my life. But from about the age of 4, I felt that way. And I was discussing this with a good friend of mine in Newcastle in the northeast of England. And she said exactly the same thing. She said, yes, I know what you mean. When I was a young child, I used to look in the mirror and think exactly the same thing. So here we are in these lives, and we have no idea what we're supposed to be doing with them, where we're going, what this place is, who created it, what we really are. And we're left just to make the best of it and try and find the answers out for ourselves. That's what we're doing on shows like this, I guess, trying to find those answers and trying to seek that truth. It's a path I've been on all my life. The more I look into it, the more confused I get. Just being honest, you would think that with the more information that you accumulate, the more knowledge, the more wisdom, the closer you get towards figuring it all out. I'm finding the opposite is the case. I'm more confused than ever. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm floundering around in the dark. And again, if we had a loving, caring, benevolent God, and these lives were for our own personal benefit and personal growth, that would not be the state of affairs that we would find ourselves in. We would have some kind of guidebook. I'm not talking about holy books like the Bible or the Quran. I'm talking about a spiritual guidebook. We would just inherently know what we're doing here. And we don't. Lots of people claim to know. They're all over YouTube spouting their opinions all over the place. Everyone's got an opinion, but that's all it really is. I don't think anyone really knows. So we're left just to make the best of it with whatever knowledge and wisdom we can accumulate for ourselves.
Yeah, it's a very strange situation we find ourselves in, and for me personally, Toltec, I've in my life looked at many different traditions and training systems, as it were, and personally, I can vouch for the Toltec system itself. That for my predilections, as one would say, or for me as I am made up, it really works. I get it. I took to it like a fish to water. And it's important that in the kind of situation we find ourselves in, it's very important, I feel, to not get distracted by the bling bling of this realm, of which there is plenty, and to really find something bigger than oneself to focus on, a bigger focus, something that brings us out of the needing to be fulfilled by the bling bling of this world. If I just get that house, or if I just get a good love interest, or if I can just fill in the blank, if I could just fill in the blank. But all they do is those things, I think, aid the machinery that, Mark, you're talking about, and Howdie as well, that seems to be fueled by the adrenaline output of pretty much every organic being that I've, dogs, cats, birds, worms, predator-prey system. The only reason I can think of a predator-prey system in place would be for a harvesting purpose, a harvesting of adrenaline on the physical level, and we have reports of adrenalized blood being ingested by, Mark will know far more about it than I do. and so on and so forth. And then the fear I believe is the fuel on the subtler side of things that keeps this system going. Again, does anyone know that for sure? There's no way to know for sure. However, one can, like be a bit of a Sherlock Holmes and just deduce from what information and experience we see. There are some questions coming in. Should I shoot some of them to you guys?
Yeah, can see some of these now.
All right, let's go. We've got about 20 minutes and then 10 minutes to wrap up. So, Mark, have you watched Archaic's Predator versus Prey Echoes? Archaic's is... Mark, are you familiar with Archaic's?
I am familiar with him and his material, and I did watch quite a few of his videos when I first got started on this line of research. To be honest, I find most of his stuff does go over my head. I do struggle to comprehend what he's trying to put across. I'm not really resonating and vibing with most of what he has to say. Maybe that's down to some shortcomings on my part, but I've not watched his material for quite some time. It mentions Predator versus Prey there, though, and you made a reference to it. And here's another thing about this reality in which we live, this realm. Why is the food system, the so-called food chain, so utterly horrific, violent, and brutal?
Yeah.
If the creator of this realm is all great and all powerful and could have set into place any kind of reality he or it had wanted, why did he or it choose one where living sentient beings need to murder each other in horrific ways in their billions every single day just to survive another day in this realm? I mean, that's got to be a red flag, right? When we come to question the true nature of, or the true motives of whatever created this place. And I'll just jump in there. There's a question there about numerology, and then I'll see if Howdie wants to answer this one. But just quickly, somebody's answering, does numerology dictate what sort of role we have to play in this reincarnation? Numbers have figured in my life to an absolutely ridiculously meaningful degree in recent years. So as a general example, I realized some time ago that all the birth dates of members of my family can be added together to create the birth date of another member of the family. So, for instance, somebody's born on the 12th, somebody else is born on the 5th, add them together, 17, another family member's born on the 17th. Then you can add that to another figure, you arrive at another family member's birthday, and so on. And this happens with no numbers left over. They completely add up perfectly. And while we were recording this show, I just happened to glance at the clock there. And the first time I glanced at it, just randomly, it was 12:50. So my birth date is the 12th of May, 12th of the 5th, it's 12:50. I then looked again a few minutes later, it was 21:50. So again, it's my birth date sort of rearranged. And I see those figures, 1s, 2s, and 5s everywhere all the time. So I don't quite know what's going on there, but it's very consistent with this idea that this reality is mathematically coded, and it's numbers and it's binary. It's basically code, is how I see it.
Wonderful. Howdie, there's a question for you here. Let me just scroll back up here. Howdie, how did you do your recapitulation intently and with discipline?
Well, I think with all recapitulations, you get a starting point, and then you learn how to do it as you go along. It becomes very personal. Everyone will do it very differently. But I did understand the principle that there's two principles I did learn. One, I did it in blocks of time. So I did mine that I would go every night from about 11 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning. And I would do, like, say, university, or I would do, high school or something. That if that took a month or 2 months or 3 months, I would just do that continually until that block of time was completed, and then I would take a break. So it was hard, intense periods of work. I realized there were two important elements. One that was coming up was seeing, important part of the recapitulation is seeing the loops of your life, the continuous that everything is just a replaying loop. And someone can ask, did you recapitulate every moment of your entire life? Yes, I did. He said, but it took you 4.5 years. That's correct. How is that possible to do? Well, once you realize that your life is giant repetitive loops, once you uncover one loop, you uncover like 30 of them, and you, in a sense, do 30 at a time. So you actually uncover massive amounts of your life without even having to go through it when you see the looping nature. That's one part of it. The other part of it was I knew that going through the recapitulation with my mind was just the warm-up. It was just getting me to do the practice. And it was very, very difficult. It was very annoying. It was very, my mind tried really, really hard to get me to not do it. But once I had the experience where I was no longer, in a sense, watching an event, where I was in the event, where I was reliving the event again, fully, like I was there. That's recap change. And I'll just share this last little piece of it. When I did my recap the second time, when I did my second full life recapitulation, it was really, really different. Because when I did it the second time, I actually only, I tried to recap some events that were left, but all I saw were like a second. Like I would be shown 1 second of an event, like where I was at a hotel desk and I was checking in and a key was being given and a comment was made. It was like this, the emotion of that 1 second was the only thing that was being recapitulated in the second event. It got in the second life pass. It got so focused. So I started also realizing that as you recapitulate, if you do it again and again, it'll be very, very different. Second time will be different. Your third time will be different. Because you're unraveling more and more of yourself, and it's going to get tighter. And you have to start with the whole thing before you can begin literally recapitulating seconds.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Here's another one here. In your view, are we the generative force of our own experience, or is our energy used to fuel the simulation that chooses certain experiences to present to us? Or is it an interrelational paradox? Who wants to go with that one?
Well, to my thinking, it's more the second option there. Our energy is used to fuel the simulation. But there are aspects of the first one as well. So I think that although we find ourselves here without our consent, but remember agreeing to incarnate into this life and undergo these experiences, I do feel that we are individual units of the original true creator source. So this would be the original creator God, if people want to put that label on it. So I feel that the so-called God of this realm is not the original source creator. It's what the Gnostics referred to as the demiurge. It's a lesser god. It can be referred to as a demon. You know, names are put on it such as Satan and Yahweh and names such as this. But I think that we are what the Gnostics referred to as divine sparks. So we are aspects of that original true God consciousness. And that's where I feel the good news lies, because there's got to be some good news in all of this, right? And this is what I was so keen to just get in there before we finish this show. I think optimism is to be derived from the knowledge that that's what we truly are. You know, we're not slaves. We might find ourselves enslaved within this simulation reality. But once we exit these bodies and these lives are done, and we go back to our original true consciousness, we become free, or we have the option to become free. And I think perhaps facing up to this uncomfortable information, where we've got the opportunity to in these lives, is the key to us becoming free. Because going back to what we were talking about earlier, the more attachment we have to this realm and the more belief we have in it, in ourselves, our names, our physical bodies, the more likely we are to be coerced or enticed or tricked or whatever it may be into coming back here for another go round. Whereas if we can let go of that kind of attachment, which includes recognizing that we're more than these physical bodies, we're more than an arm, Howdie and Mark, maybe that's the key to us getting out of here and returning home to our true original source home.
Well, I've got something there. I'll kind of come from the point of view of the sort of the average person, and I can truly understand that, because if you imagine someone who only knows their, we are all beings of relationship, aren't we? We would die if we could not relate. If the ability to relate, to exchange energy was taken away from us, I believe that we would not survive. Babies die due to lack of love. Literally, physically, they can't survive. And if all that an individual knows is their relationships, I love my dog, I love my cats, I love my house, my childhood home and the 80s, and the music was great, and my school, and then my friends and my mom, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on, layers of them. And if the only option to freedom is giving all that up and jumping into what could be called the jump into infinity, or jumping into the unknown, how many would opt for that, even if it was the better option, and this awareness could see that this is a horrible life? But I've got my mum's coming back down as my sister this time, or if you want to go down that thought path, my dog's going to become a cat, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and it's horrible, but that's too much. All I know is this, so I'd rather take this again. Any thoughts on that sort of? Because I can imagine that being played out in someone's awareness when faced with that kind of a choice.
Sure, that's how we got here ourselves.
Yeah, I believe that. There's no way to know, but that sounds.
That's exactly it. It was obviously another trick was played because we didn't know who we are. Once you know who you are, you can't be tricked. That's the challenge. So you say these people wouldn't give this up. Well, no, because they believe that they are the person they see in the mirror, and that the things they do are important, and the life is important, and whatever happens is, once you see it as a story, not that you deny the story, not that you pretend that it's not important, not that you step away from the suffering that exists here, but you can never fully engage with the simulation. People talk, they say it's a simulation. Okay, then why is it bothering you? And they don't have an answer for that. So there's so many layers of the work. Like, just seeing it's a simulation that's a start. But again, it's again that gray error, right? The gray error, which Gary Harmon laid out fabulously, was if you take this whole world to be an illusion and don't include yourself in that illusion, you've made the classic spiritual mistake. And that's everything is constantly being done to solidify me. And that's actually now where I see this concept, this exiting the matrix, the reincarnation trap, the soul trap. It's becoming big news now. It's in a lot of different places. And generally the message is somehow, how can I use these concepts to end my suffering? How can I use these concepts to fix something, to end something, and they're missing the first question, which is, who's ending this? Who's escaping? What is actually escaping? You haven't defined that which is. So until you've made the definition, all this other stuff is valuable as information. It's a valuable examination of the cave, but you have to fully define the examiner before you can actually determine if anything is of value or not. It's a very bizarre idea that until you know everything, you know nothing.
Yeah.
And then when you do know everything, you still know nothing. It's very bizarre.
Absolutely. The more I know, I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now, right? That kind of deal.
I've just given you I've been giving you some wordplay there. What I just said in that last little sentence, people should be able to unravel that for months.
Yeah. And what my way to understand how someone would find this so challenging is because when it comes to feelings and sort of knowledges, feelings will win out every time. And so if emotional integration,
well let's face it, this is a horror realm. I mean,
exactly.
Mark has studied this intensely with the stuff that he's looked. I mean, he's looked at a particular area that I looked into it enough that I needed to know about it, but he's looked into the detail, right? Mark can give you
ritual abuse and such, right?
Yeah. The horror, the actual horror that goes, the kind of thing that the average person tries to pretend doesn't happen here.
Exactly.
And that's an important part of actually understanding to move along, of just how serious this topic is.
For sure. And so what do you guys, Mark, from your experience, you've had to emotionally journey with this stuff, right? No one, I don't think, only a psychopath would not feel anything. Knowing, journeying with the true nature of this realm, right? So how does one who is either starting out on this journey or midway through the journey and realizing more and more things, as these days a lot of people are in that midway category, right, where so much is, so much information is available, but not enough time to emotionally integrate and find that inner core of stability inside, like Howdie was saying, so that you don't crack when faced with the unknown within oneself. Any thoughts to share on that, Mark?
I think you're either someone who wants the truth no matter what, and you're prepared to go wherever it takes you, or you're not. It's one or the other. Most people obviously fall into the latter category. They don't want the truth enough to look into such ugly subject areas as satanic ritual abuse, trauma-based mind control, child sex trafficking, all this sort of stuff. It's horrific. It's dark. It can really weigh down on your soul. But at the end of the day, if you're someone that wants truth, you have to face up to these things. And maybe those of us that hunger for the truth enough are the ones that are going to stand some chance of not finding ourselves spat back out in this reality. That's my best hope at this point. It's completely understandable why people don't want to look at this stuff. And if you do, you're going to have to let a few things go in your life. You're going to have to make a few sacrifices, no pun intended, but you might have to knock the odd football game on the head. You might have to not go down the pub with the lads quite so much. You might have to, spend your days off doing some research instead of fun things, if you really want to get to the bottom of what's going on here, or at least stand some chance of arriving at those conclusions. So it does take a level of commitment from an individual to get to the sort of levels of knowledge that are going to be required. But again, ultimately, it comes down to just how much do you want the truth? Simple as that, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's one, at some point, the individual, we all have to jump off that fence. We really do. At whatever point in life, that has got to happen. And personally, I always say, no harm, no foul. If you want to walk away from this, and like in the Matrix movie, that guy who says, just reinsert me back in. I want to be an actor, or I don't want to remember anything. And he's eating the tuna steak. You remember that bit? no harm, no foul in my books. You're fine. At least you're kind of, there's some kind of conscious choices involved. Whether it's for your good or detriment is not for me. I don't care. But at least there is a deliberate choice being made. Or if you know, you want to move towards into the unknown parts of your own existence, then that does require what you just said, Mark, which is you either want it or you don't. There's no just sitting on the fence and watching millions of podcasts and becoming amazing as a debate artist about these things. I feel that emotional integration, time to give oneself, like Howdie went golfing after he went a bit crazy, so he was told, go play a little bit of golf and strengthen your shields, as it were, and get some pragmatic sense, sobriety, get a cool head on your shoulders again, then look at it again. But that emotional integration has to come through, and I feel that is very easily overlooked, especially with males. Men I use rarely nowadays, the word. I use males, not many men left. And it is very important. It is very important. Otherwise, all the energy just gets stuck up here, and it never really just goes in and gives true authority to that being. An authority based on integration of all these different things that awareness is facing inside them. Any thoughts on that? Final parting shots before we wrap up and in going to a bit more of a uplifting.
Howdie, what do you think?
No, I'm fine with that. That was, you know, was a comment. We can move on.
Mark?
Just to add that it's completely understandable why religions flourish and thrive, because they are coping mechanisms that mask the rather horrific reality of what this place is and what these lives are. That's the purpose of religions, to try and give some meaning and some context to these unanswered questions in people's lives. So these institutions have been set up, and people have been coerced and programmed and conditioned to gravitate towards one religion or another, largely dependent upon what part of the world you happen to grow up in. And they claim to provide all the answers. You know, you've got all these big searching questions in life. Well, here are the answers. They're between the covers of this holy book. Everything you need to know is in here. You don't need to go searching anymore. You don't need to go asking these questions, because we're telling you this is how it is. This is what you need to think. And so they become a coping mechanism in pretty much the same way as drugs and alcohol and all kinds of addictions do. It's masking. That's what people are doing. They're employing these ways of distracting their minds from going into unwanted areas and keeping them busy with all kinds of other things. I mean, I do this myself. I do it myself through work. I do so much work. People say to me all the time, Mark, you know, your work ethic is amazing. How do you churn out so many videos and books and talks and stuff? And I say, because I have to. Because I have to lose myself in my work to prevent my mind from going off in places that I prefer it didn't. So that's what religions are there for. And then as an alternative to the orthodox mainstream religions, you've got this sort of new age way of thinking now, which I referred to earlier, that our lives are, you know, this is a giant schoolhouse and we come here to learn lessons, to grow and evolve and all this. And I used to gravitate towards all of that. I don't anymore. I can see all the holes in those kind of arguments. But all these things are there for a reason, because the powers that be, and I think the so-called elites that we refer to, secret society networks and those that control governments and such, are basically doing the bidding of the god of this realm, the architect of this realm. They're keeping the fear and the trauma and the suffering and the anxiety going through their activities. And they love it when people gravitate towards religions, because they can put them in a box. And it stops them thinking and asking questions and scrutinizing things. Because that's a controller's worst nightmare. A human population engaged in critical thought, asking questions no matter how awkward or unsettling they may be, and not being satisfied until they get the answers, and not giving up until they get the answers.
Yeah. Any where do you guys think this is all going? Any new age of Aquarius coming up anytime soon? Or need we even discuss that? Any thoughts on where this is all going, according to
Oh, well,
you guys?
Q and the White Hats are going to charge in on a white horse and save us anytime now, don't you know?
The archangels and the I mean, Glastonbury, this town is absolutely chockers with what the religions don't get, the new age sweeps up, right? And
yeah, a new simulation's being created. It's been created. It's ready to go. This one is ending. The simulation will soon shut off, and we're kind of at the switch point, which is why so many people are actually talking about these subjects, because it's energetically becoming obvious. And the new simulation will be either brought into by this one will become so horrific that people will be suggested to go to a happier place, go to a safer place. Others will be told that the new 5D ascension is coming, and they've passed the great test, and their great teacher is waiting for them. And so it doesn't matter which one they're going to go with. It's consciousness, the soul will be fooled, and it will go into the next simulation. It'll go, D means deeper, right? D means depth, deeper into the quicksand. But on another level, it's another, like someone says, well, are you worried about that? No. Aren't you concerned about there being another simulation? No. It's another fake realm. It's another fake realm in a completely fake world. So why would I be concerned about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the focus is stillness. That's the focus. And that's what people don't. There's a time when you have to be active. You have to put a lot of action in. You have to put a lot of work in. You have to have an intent, and you have to follow it. But there also comes a time when you need to stop. You've done enough. You found out enough. You've read enough books. You've done enough, and it's time to just literally stop and be still. And that is one of the hardest things to get someone to do. Either they stop before it's time. Right, there's a lot of these new traditions. Neo-Advaita is a famous one of it. Just, there's nothing you have to do. Just sit and drink your tea. Ha ha. And so, and they're not actually wrong. That's the problem. They're not actually wrong. It's just it's at the right exact moment when you have to follow. Up until that point, you have to turn over every rock. You have to look under every area. You have to do everything you possibly can. But then there's a certain point you realize, I've done enough. Now I'm just going to be still. And that's one of the hardest things to get someone to do, is to get them to stop when it's time. They just, that's another part of the path itself. The path itself tricks people into just walking in circles continually, even though they're almost ready to go. They have the power they need to leave, but they just think, I don't know enough. I need to know more. I need to do this. I need to study this. And you can just watch them just. So that there's another group that will do that. New simulation starting. Why don't you go study that? Oh, great! I can learn more about the matrix and how it's built. So every possible trick in the book will be used to get people to go in. And but before that happens, this simulation is going to get hellish. Whatever anyone thinks it's hellish to this point, you ain't seen nothing yet. This thing is going to get wild. And it's just fine to be prepared for it. And as Mr. Park told us, as I was with Mr. Park when 9/11 happened, and some people came over to the house that afternoon, and World War III is going to happen. We're all going to die. What are we going to do? And Mr. Park just said, do your exercise. And we just we looked at each other and it's like, of course, what difference does it make if the world's going to blow up or if everything's going to, what we focused on our exercises. We focused on our daily routine. So why should we change our daily routine? And we all went back to doing our exercises. Of course, it doesn't matter. Once you've made the commitment to a certain practice and a certain work, it doesn't matter what the reality does. You do the work. And so that's that reminder of just once you have your inner core and no matter what the realm does, that shouldn't change how your inner core is responding to it.
Yeah, very, very, very good. Mark, anything to say about that?
Nothing really to add. That was a pretty profound comment that I'll be reflecting on myself.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, this was an absolute pleasure. And judging from the comments, everyone has really got a lot of value out of it. This was not for anyone's enjoyment or entertainment, not on this channel. This was for how useful are these three human beings coming together going to be for you, right? And on that one, I think it has proved very useful for whoever is ready to make use of this conversation and very, very deep concepts laid within. And also for me, we can easily ignore the presence of three powerful human beings and powerful listeners and exchange those for the words that have been, you know, and they become more important than there's just hanging out, that the lost art of hanging out. People are used to hanging out with video game characters these days more than they hang out with humans. And that alone is enough to unlock many things in the witnessing side of the human, whoever is part of this conversation, all 66 plus 3, 69 of us. Mark, I truly, truly enjoyed being with you and your vulnerability and your ability to be secure in where you are. Wherever you are just there. I truly enjoyed witnessing that. You have no problems being very, yeah, well, I do that. I do that. Yeah, I do that. And I love it because you don't try to become, to appear better than you are. You're just where you are is where you are, and take me or leave me, but that's where it is. And I love it.
Well,
So
thank you. I
thank you.
appreciate that. I think it's fairly clear that I'm early days in this sort of research compared to you guys. I'm still finding my way with it all. And yeah, I'm happy to admit that there's so much I don't know. I'm a work in progress. I'm imperfect. I'm flawed. But I think people like hearing commentators talking about that aspect of themselves. I get a lot of comments from people saying it's great that you express yourself in this way because it makes me realize I'm not alone, because I feel that way about myself as well. So if these conversations can be of value to people on that kind of personal level, then they're very worthwhile. And judging by the comments we're getting here in the chat, a lot of people have found this conversation to be very worthwhile. So I'm happy it went ahead.
Yeah, it did. And I'm happy that we all could come together. Howdie, I would like to say it has been a great pleasure to have your presence here, just like Mark's, and your wisdom born out of personal experience, not just bookish stuff, but how you have learned to live in your life and conduct your life is a testament. For me, you wouldn't need to speak a word, and whatever you have spoken would still come through. That's how I experience you, and thank you for your presence. It's been just fantastic, and I hope that it just really, we all go from strength to strength and power to power, because where I'm concerned, we have been given that divine capability. No one does not have that ace card up their sleeve. No one exists without that ace card of choosing power over weakness. And what that looks like for each person, that's for them to determine. Is there anything any one of you would like to say to the audience, or should we wrap up?
Well, first I'll just say thanks, Adam, for the kind words and for having me on today. And like I say, I've known about you for a number of years. I was going to reach out a few years ago and talk to you, and it just something happened and it didn't come up. So I'm glad we did have a chance to communicate and talk. Mark, really glad to see you again. Mark has done an amazing depth of research on and knowledge in the last 2 years. Your last 2 years have been like a speed rocket of work. And you should make sure you remind yourself of that, acknowledge the work that you've done, because it has been a tremendous amount. And one thing, and I'll stop. One thing Adam was reflecting to, I think it's important that people meet actually in person. Yes, we may be a bunch of video game characters, but it's important that on the journey to self-knowledge, you have spiritual friends. And you have spiritual friends that you are able to meet and communicate with, not just like this, not just talking to a screen, where you can actually sit across a table and have conversation and laugh together and be upset together and go somewhere together. And there's a lot of people just like you watching this now who would love to have a spiritual friend, to have someone to talk with. So you're not alone in that regard. And all you have to do is put a little work in, and you might be surprised that someone that could be a good conversation person for you lives closer to you than you might think.
Fantastic advice. Really, probably the most important advice of these times. We are relational beings. We fade. We are light, if you want to call the light of awareness. It dims. We dim if we don't relate with meaning, if we don't have meaningful relationships. And Howdie, that was the best advice you could have given for the audience on this channel.
That's one of the main values of conferences and meetup events. I do a lot of these, and just as important as the information that's presented by the speakers is the networking, the opportunity to engage and interact socially with others of a like mind. That is just pure gold, opportunities like that. And these events are very important in the flesh, in physicality, not over a Zoom call or whatever. As Howdie said, these are very important aspects to dealing with these lives.
For sure. Mark, anything coming up in terms of conferences or anything where you hope to be soon?
Loads, mate. I never stop. I'm on perpetual tour. So all my dates are listed at my website, djmarkdevlin.com, and there's links to all my videos and everything else there. And I'd just like to say that you've been a great host here. I do a lot of interviews, and many hosts just give a single sentence question and leave the guest to speak for 20 minutes, whereas you've got very involved in the conversation and shared many insights yourself. And I like that in a host. It really helps to move the conversation along and put it into proper perspective. So great job done there yourself as well.
Thank you. For first time with guests on the channel, I think we did pretty well. Mark, any final parting shots, and then we'll wrap up, about your latest book, because I don't want that not mentioned, because it is a very good. It's part of a series. So just a quick reminder to the people for that, please.
Yeah. So my newest book is called No One's Dad's a Plumber, which is a deliberately ambiguous title. It's the fourth book in my Musical Truth series. So it's exposing the true nature of the corporate music industry and what it's really used for. I do intend to write a book on the subjects we've spoken about today, actually. So probably in a couple of years, I'll be starting to put that together. But this is the fourth book on my music industry research, and I think I'm going to be leaving it there. So it's called No One's Dad's a Plumber. It's on Amazon, and it's available from me now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Howdie, is there anything you'd like to share with us about your work, or are we good to go?
I guess we're mostly good to go, but I've left YouTube. I've left these open channels. It's now everything I do is on my locals community. I have a very nice community of about 2,000 people there. There are people, in the majority, who want to do serious work, that are involved in wanting, they want out. They want out of this realm. They want to go home, and they just what to do. And so that's kind of what we're doing there. And of course, my new book, Empty the Cave, from last year, is being very curiously challenged by the Matrix. There's a lot of strange stuff that's happened for people to try to obtain it. So I have made the PDF file of the book available for a donation on my website for people who have trouble trying to get the book and for some reason can't. In some countries they can't order it. It's very strange. So you can always go to my website and just get a PDF of it.
And the website is Howdie. The website, please.
My name. So if you go to myname.com, you'll find it. And, yeah.
Great.
And other than that, just focusing on having some stillness in the summer.
I love that. I love it. I love it. If someone is interested in training under you, Howdie, is that possible these days, or are you taking people on?
No, everything is done through my work, through the books, through my locals channel, and that's how things. I think, particularly in the last book, I think I've said what I wanted to say very, very clearly. And if someone takes that to heart and unravels it, I think they'll answer a lot of questions for themselves.
Wonderful. Let's wrap it up, gentlemen. Thank you so much, really, from the bottom of my heart, for taking the time to come and join us. And who knows, perhaps further down the line, we may meet up again for another fruitful interaction. Until then, stay blessed.
Well, of course, real quickly, I mean, we don't live far from each other. Let's be clear. We were in the same area. I mean, maybe maybe somehow we'll put something together and we can all actually meet in person. And the next time we do this,
we
won't be on a screen. We'll be in the same room with one camera.
Yeah.
And we're all talking in the same space.
I'm down for that.
Sounds
good. Yeah.
Let's do it in these lifetimes, as none of us will be having another one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we don't do it in this simulation, it ain't happening in another one.
Not using me for fuel anymore, man. Not going to happen. Fantastic. I love these ideas. This last bit of conversation has been as enriching as the rest of it. And let's make it happen. I'd love to get Tony Sayers on it as well, and a few chosen others. We could even hold a mini sort of a meetup kind of a thing and enjoy ourselves. Perhaps it could even happen in Glastonbury if Howdie wants to travel up here. It's a town worth visiting at least once.
Right kind of town.
Yeah, exactly. All right, on that happy note, thank you so much, and lots of love. Thank you for attending, gentlemen. Take care. Bye for now.